American explorer Victor Vescovo descended nearly 11 kilometers into the Mariana Trench, and this...
In 1960, two men touched the bottom of the ocean and saw something staring back at them. A fish, alive, where science said nothing could survive. But there were no photos, no proof, just their word. 60 years later, cameras finally went back down. What appeared on screen wasn't the mystery fish. It was creatures that glow like spaceships, shrimp the size of kittens, and sounds that shouldn't exist in total silence. Then scientists found something that changed everything, and it had nothing to do with fish. Today, we're revealing what cameras keep finding at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. In 1875, the HMS Challenger lowered a weighted rope into the Pacific and pulled up a number no one expected: 26,850 feet. That was the first time the world realized there was something strange about that patch of ocean east of the Philippines. It was later named the Mariana Trench. Then, in 1951, another British survey ship came back and got even deeper readings, more than 35,000 feet in one particular spot. They called that place Challenger Deep. But numbers were just numbers until someone actually went down there, and nobody had. That changed on January 23, 1960. A Swiss engineer named Jacques Picard and a young U.S. Navy officer named Don Walsh climbed inside a steel ball barely big enough for two people. It was bolted to a huge gasoline-filled float they called the Trieste. It wasn't graceful, and it wasn't safe by any modern standard. It was just dense steel and raw courage. As the submersible began its descent into the unknown, it took nearly 5 hours to sink to the bottom. At exactly 35,800 feet, or 10,101 meters, they touched down. That's deeper than Mount Everest is tall. If you dropped the world's tallest mountain into the trench, the peak would still be over a mile underwater. Inside Trieste, the viewports were just small circles of thick glass surrounded by pressure-tight steel. The outside pressure was over 1,000 times greater than at the surface, more than 16,000 psi. A crack in the glass, or a loose bolt, and the entire sphere would implode instantly. But it held. And what they saw down there changed science forever. Jacques Picard later wrote about the moment. Just beneath them, resting on the sediment, was something alive, something looking back. He described a flatfish, about a foot long and half as wide, with two round eyes. It didn't dart away in panic. It drifted slowly, calmly, into the darkness. For a moment, they just stared. Then Picard and Walsh shook hands, sitting there on the deepest spot on Earth, stunned by the quiet presence of life. This wasn't supposed to be possible. Until that moment, scientists believed the bottom of the ocean was sterile, a lifeless desert, crushed by unimaginable pressure. The fish, if it was a fish, proved them wrong. Picard later said, "Here, in an instant, was the answer. Could life exist in the greatest depths of the ocean? It could. But there was a problem. There were no photographs, no samples, no proof. Just a fleeting glimpse through thick glass, in low light, under extreme pressure." Over time, the story began to unravel. Some marine biologists argued it couldn't have been a fish at all. The biochemical limits of bony fish suggest they can't survive beyond about 8,200 to 8,400 meters. Beyond that depth, a fish's enzymes and cell membranes stop functioning. The proteins literally fall apart. Challenger Deep was much deeper than that. So what did they see? Some think it was a sea cucumber, or perhaps a type of giant amphipod. Others say it was an illusion created by the shifting sediment. No one knows for sure. But that didn't erase the fact that even if the fish was a mistake, the trench was not empty. Trieste's lights revealed tiny white creatures swimming past the viewport. Amphipods, small shrimp-like animals. These weren't guesses. They were real, verified, and alive at the bottom of the deepest place on Earth. Their presence forced scientists to rethink everything about the deep sea. This wasn't a graveyard, it was an ecosystem. For a long time after the Trieste's descent into the Mariana Trench in 1960, no one went back. Almost 50 years passed before anyone dared return to the bottom of Challenger Deep. In that time, it wasn't people but machines that made their way down. Cameras and robots became the new explorers. By the 1990s, engineers had created robotic submersibles tough enough to survive the crushing pressure nearly 7 miles below. In 1995, Japan's Kaiko probe became the first unmanned vehicle to successfully reach the trench floor. It didn't just reach it, it brought back samples and video, the first clear footage of a place no one had seen since Walsh and Picard. What showed up on camera wasn't flashy. It was a vast stretch of fine, dark sediment, a quiet underworld. But even without any large creatures in sight, scientists could tell something was living down there. The seafloor bore trails and tracks, thin lines pressed into the mud, probably made by burrowing creatures or sea cucumbers inching along. It was quiet, but it wasn't dead. Then came a new machine. In 2009, the US launched a hybrid vehicle called Nereus. It made it to Challenger Deep and stayed for over 10 hours. The high-definition video it recorded stunned researchers. The trench floor was soft and gelatinous, like thick mud that barely held its shape. Small animals appeared in the footage, see-through sea cucumbers, tiny crustaceans called amphipods, pink and skittering across the floor. These were the same scavengers that Trieste's crew had seen decades earlier. But now, they were seen in color, in motion, in detail. The footage showed something no one had really grasped before. The deepest place on Earth wasn't a graveyard. It was slow, quiet life. One scientist called it featureless, like staring at a blank canvas. But the longer you looked, the more it moved. Then the story changed. On March 26, 2012, James Cameron, the filmmaker who directed Titanic and Avatar, became the second human to reach Challenger Deep and the first to do it solo. His submersible, the Deep Sea Challenger, was a strange green machine built for this exact purpose. It took him 2.5 hours to descend. He stayed there for nearly 3. Cameras rolled the whole time. What he saw wasn't what he expected. The trench wasn't teeming with alien fish or strange sea monsters. It was, in his words, as bleak and barren as the moon. The floor was flat, gelatinous, almost lifeless. He didn't see any fish. Nothing larger than an inch moved. A few amphipods drifted by. That was it. He saw no tracks, no visible life beyond the tiniest microbes or scavengers. He said it felt like visiting another planet. Scientists were surprised. Life did exist there, but it was easy to miss, scattered, hidden, and small. Still, Cameron's dive changed everything. His footage ran non-stop. Later, researchers like Scripps oceanographer Natasha Gallo studied the tapes frame by frame. They found life in the details, traces in the sediment, flickers in the water, DNA in the samples. The place wasn't empty. It was just stripped to the minimum. Every creature down there was surviving on scraps of organic matter that had fallen through nearly 7 miles of ocean. After Cameron's dive, deep-sea cameras became the star of exploration. In 2016, the NOAA ship Okeanos Explorer sent a robot down into the Mariana Trench with live-streaming high-definition video. The world could now watch the bottom of the ocean in real time. Between April and July, the crew recorded dozens of strange and unknown creatures, some at the bottom, some in nearby seamounts. The footage showed how much we still didn't know. A NOAA scientist said it best. This highlights, once again, how much we still have to learn about our vast, unexplored ocean. It wasn't just about Challenger Deep anymore. The whole trench was a mystery. Then, in 2019, a new name entered the story. Explorer and investor Victor Vesco led the 5 Deeps expedition, a project to visit the deepest point in every ocean. His sub, the DSV Limiting Factor, was built to go deeper than anything before. In May 2019, Vescovo descended to 35,153 feet, 10,127 meters, breaking Cameron's record and becoming the deepest solo diver in history. His sub carried not just cameras, but side-scan sonar to map the trench floor with more precision than ever. The footage was clear. The creatures were new, but what left scientists speechless wasn't a fish or an ancient organism. It was trash. In the middle of this remote, hostile, untouched place, they found evidence of humans, a plastic bag, wrappers, the fingerprint of our waste, sitting quietly at the bottom of the world. That changed the conversation. The deepest place on Earth wasn't immune. It had already been reached, not just by machines and explorers, but by pollution. At the bottom of the ocean, where no light reaches, and pressure would flatten a car, scientists have been sending down cameras for years. Not once or twice, but over dozens of missions. Each time, what comes back on screen isn't just strange. It rewrites what we thought life could be. One of the most fascinating creatures to appear is the Mariana snailfish. It looks soft and fragile, like a tadpole made of jelly. But it's not weak. It lives over 26,000 feet below the surface. And in 2017, scientists finally gave it a name, Pseudoleparus swirei. Cameras had been catching glimpses of it between 8,000 to 8,236 meters, nearly 27,300 feet. That made it the deepest fish ever filmed. It's small, only a few inches, and almost ghost-like. No scales, no flashy colors, but it's perfectly built for where it lives. Instead of bones, it has cartilage. Instead of tough skin, it has a gelatinous body. And inside its cells, it carries molecules like TMAO, which help its proteins hold together under crushing pressure. Down there, the pressure is over 1,100 times what we feel at sea level. A submarine hull would groan, yet the snailfish floats calmly, hunting crustaceans. It's not just surviving, it's thriving. Scientists were stunned. They believed fish couldn't go much deeper. In fact, past 8,200 to 8,400 meters, vertebrate life starts to hit its biological ceiling. That's why, even when James Cameron dived to nearly 11 kilometers in 2012, he didn't see fish. The snailfish marks the edge. But it wasn't the only one showing up. On another dive, researchers saw creatures that looked like shrimp, except they were the size of a kitten. Amphipods are common in deep trenches. Most are tiny, an inch or two, but some belong to a species called Alicella gigantea. These monsters can grow over a foot long. That's 13 inches of translucent armored scavenger crawling across the seabed. They showed up in swarms when bait was dropped. Hundreds of them tearing apart chunks of fish at 35,000 feet. It felt impossible. Their shells should dissolve in that pressure, yet they don't. In 2019, Japanese scientists discovered that some trench amphipods use aluminum pulled from seawater to strengthen their shells. That's right, they armor themselves with metal in the dark. The deeper the cameras went, the stranger the sightings became. In April 2016, a NOAA camera captured something that looked more like a UFO than an animal. At 3,700 meters, over 12,100 feet down, a jellyfish floated into view. Its bell was crystal clear, but glowing inside were bright yellow and red lines. Two rings of tentacles hovered like a trap. It didn't move much. It didn't have to. This jelly was a killer just by hanging still. It belonged to a group called Crossota, and it had never been seen before. Scientists watching the feed couldn't believe it was real. It felt like watching a special effect, but it was alive, and it wasn't alone. Nearby, the cameras picked up other jelly-like drifters. Ctenophores, also called comb jellies, shimmered with rainbows from their beating cilia. Sea cucumbers floated by like ghosts. Then came something that made even veteran researchers lean forward. A Dumbo octopus appeared on screen. Its name comes from its ear-like fins, which it uses to swim with a slow, flapping motion. This one was pale, almost translucent, paddling through the currents near the trench. It looked like a creature from a fairy tale, not Earth, but it was real, and it had company. Another strange octopus showed up on a separate dive, this time off Hawaii, but still around 4,000 meters deep. It was entirely white, with no pigment at all. It had no visible fins. Its body was smooth and gelatinous. It seemed to glide rather than swim. It was quickly nicknamed Casper by the researchers, and it appeared to be a completely new species. When that video was released, it spread quickly. A translucent octopus, white as bone, floating like a ghost in the deep. Back in the Mariana Trench, other cirrate octopods, distant relatives of Dumbo and Casper, were caught on film. They moved slowly, as if time passed differently at those depths. Each movement felt intentional. There was no rush. And why would there be? Down there, in the crushing cold, speed is rarely the answer. Survival is. Every animal had evolved for that place, and no other. What struck the scientists most wasn't just the creatures. It was that they kept showing up, dive after dive, different cameras, different times, different parts of the trench, but always something new. It meant one thing: we don't really know what lives down there. Every glimpse is a first. Every clip is history. These aren't myths or blurry shapes anymore. They're caught clearly. The snailfish gliding just above the mud, the giant amphipods tearing into bait, the jellyfish that glows like a spaceship, the octopuses that look like cartoons. They're all there. On the 1st of July, 2016, something happened deep in the Pacific Ocean that left even the most seasoned scientists speechless. A camera operated by NOAA, slowly moving across the ocean floor about 8,200 feet below the surface, caught sight of something that didn't belong. It wasn't a wreck, or a rock, or even a new kind of coral. It was a fish, but not just any fish. This one looked like a ghost, completely translucent, pale white, no visible scales, and 2 tiny black dots where eyes should have been. It hovered just above a ridge, slowly waving in the current like it was floating through a dream. The creature was only about 10 centimeters long, no more than 4 inches, but it had just shattered a boundary scientists never thought they'd cross. The fish belonged to the Aphionidae family. Until that moment, every single member of that family had only ever been seen as a dead specimen caught in nets. Nobody had ever seen one alive before. And now here it was, gently drifting in its natural environment, unaware that it had just become the center of one of the most significant deep-sea discoveries in modern history. One of the scientists watching the live feed couldn't hold back. "This is just remarkable," he said. "A fish in this family was probably first on our wish list." And he wasn't exaggerating. This was the kind of sighting researchers spend entire careers hoping for and often never get. The ghost fish's body was soft and gelatinous, likely because it didn't need strong muscles or heavy bones down there. There was no sunlight, no predators as we know them, no need for defense. It didn't even have working eyes, just black spots where its ancestors might have seen light millions of years ago. Everything about it was a story written by evolution, adapting not just to survive, but to vanish into the quiet darkness of the deep. Bruce Mundy from NOAA summed it up simply. This was the first time anyone had ever seen a fish from that family alive, and it was a big deal. For a moment, the camera lights caught it just right, and the ghost fish seemed to pause, as if staring back. Then, just as gently as it had appeared, it faded into the shadows and was gone. But the surprises didn't stop there. On another dive, NOAA's ROV passed over what looked like a patch of strange orbs spread across the seafloor. Some were the size of marbles, others as large as apples. They turned out to be xenophyophores, giant amoebas. Each one was a single cell. Let that sink in. These weren't colonies or swarms. Each blob was just one enormous cell, growing like a sponge on the bottom of the ocean. They don't swim, they don't chase anything. They just sit there, filtering tiny particles of organic matter out of the water and waiting for the next meal to drift by. Simple, slow, and massive. Even stranger, at an underwater volcano nearby, the camera found something that looked like it belonged in a sci-fi film. A sea anemone, pale and flower-like, anchored to a rock face with tentacles streaming out, 6 feet long in all directions. That's taller than most humans. 6-foot arms drifting in the current, waiting to catch anything that brushed past. Out here, where food is scarce and days pass without change, every inch of reach matters. So evolution gave this creature arms like ropes, letting it feed from as far away as possible. It didn't move, it didn't blink, it just waved in the deep, looking both beautiful and haunting. As strange and rare as those sights were, something even more unexpected came not from the camera, but from a different kind of sensor, a hydrophone, a microphone, for the deep. NOAA scientists dropped it down into Challenger Deep, the deepest part of the Mariana Trench, expecting silence. After all, this place is nearly 7 miles down. Sunlight doesn't reach here. Pressure is crushing. It should have been quiet, but it wasn't. The moment the hydrophone started recording, it caught sound after sound after sound. The deep ocean, it turned out, wasn't silent at all. Dr. Robert Giach, an oceanographer with NOAA, later said, "You would think the deepest part of the ocean would be one of the quietest places on Earth. Yet there really is almost constant noise." He was right. There were low rumbles from distant earthquakes, moaning calls from whales, the roar of a typhoon thundering above, even the faint hum of ship propellers from hundreds of miles away. It was all there, a full symphony of Earth's forces playing in the darkness. At one point, the hydrophone captured a 5.0 magnitude earthquake, but this time, It didn't record it from above like normal. The device was actually sitting beneath the quake's epicenter, hearing the earth crack from below. When the typhoon passed overhead, the noise level spiked for days. It was like hearing a storm through the floorboards of the planet. Then came the whales, most likely fin whales, calling to each other through miles of water. Their songs reached the trench, undistorted and haunting. Their voices proved that even here, life could be heard across the darkest reaches. In 2019, a deep-sea submersible descended quietly into the Mariana Trench, the deepest known part of the world's oceans. Its pilot, Victor Vescovo, had prepared for years for this dive into the Challenger Deep, a place nearly 36,000 feet below the surface. But what the cameras captured there didn't resemble a lost world or a forgotten paradise. It resembled a gutter. As the sediment rolled past the lens, something caught the crew's attention. It wasn't a strange fish or an ancient formation. It was plastic, a thin piece of man-made material, possibly a bag, just sitting there on the seafloor like it belonged. Vescovo later said it was the kind of trash you could find in any gutter. But now, it was here, in the most remote place on Earth, at the very bottom. The world noticed. Headlines spread fast. This wasn't just disappointing, it was disturbing. Trash at the bottom of the ocean, but it didn't stop there. Other dives, other cameras, more garbage. In 2018, a NOAA team exploring Serena Deep, not far from Challenger, recorded a can of Budweiser, a tin of Spam, plastic bags tangled in rocks. Then in 2022, oceanographer Dawn Wright rode with Vescovo down into the trench again. At 6.7 miles below the surface, she saw a glass beer bottle sitting upright in the silt, like it had been carefully placed. She took a photo, posted it online. Her caption was quiet, but sharp. "We have to do better." But it's not just about what we can see. In 2017, Dr. Alan Jameson, a marine ecologist, published something that shook the scientific world. His team had used baited traps to collect tiny crustaceans from the depths of the Mariana Trench. When they analyzed the samples, they found those animals were saturated with toxic chemicals. These weren't recent spills or industrial runoff. They were persistent pollutants like PCBs and flame retardants banned decades ago. Yet here they were, inside deep ocean scavengers, in amounts 50 times higher than what had been found in China's most contaminated rivers. The numbers didn't make sense. The location didn't make sense. But the explanation was horrifyingly simple. These chemicals, clinging to particles and plastic, had sunk layer by layer, creature by creature, until they reached the trench. And when those toxins entered the food chain, they stayed. The amphipods collected from the Mariana had contamination levels as high as those found near Japan's notorious Suruga Bay. This wasn't coincidence. This was consequence. Jameson said it bluntly. The idea that the deep ocean is pristine is a myth. The trench isn't untouched. It's a catch basin, and it's connected to us. Then came microplastics. A 2018 study confirmed what scientists feared. Fibers, tiny remnants of synthetic material, had been found suspended in the deepest waters of the Mariana, not just on the surface, not just on the way down, but embedded in the trench itself. So when a new species of amphipod was discovered in 2020, it was given a name that made people stop scrolling: Eurythanes plasticus. The plastic in its stomach was found during initial dissection. It was born into a poisoned world. There's something haunting about this. The trench was always imagined as the final frontier, a place where sunlight never reached, and pressures crushed anything foolish enough to wander. But our garbage made it. Our chemicals made it. Our habits made it. And now, cameras don't just capture strange life, they capture proof that no place is safe from us. Yet, we know so little. It's estimated that less than 5% of the global ocean floor has been explored. When it comes to the deepest parts, like Mariana, we've only scratched the surface. But every dive reveals something new. In 2020, the Chinese submersible Fendoge completed 23 missions into the trench. What they found wasn't just darkness and water. They found thousands of deep-sea creatures clinging to trench walls, surviving in total blackness at depths from 8 to 1,300 feet all the way down to 31,000 feet. In 2021, The Caladan Oceanic team returned and began collecting rocks. One sample showed a strange layer of microbes growing directly on the rock face. These weren't normal bacteria. They weren't photosynthetic. These microbes lived off chemicals, not sunlight, thriving in high-pressure, low-temperature extremes. It hinted at an entire ecosystem powered by geology, not the sun. Some areas had bubbling mud volcanoes. Others had hydrothermal vents, releasing hot fluids rich in minerals. In these places, the laws of biology seemed rewritten. Life didn't just survive, it adapted in ways we barely understand. Worms, mollusks, unknown strains of bacteria, all tucked away in a pressure cooker we'd barely peeked into. Even today, scientists wonder what else might be hiding down there. Cameras have seen mostly small creatures so far, but each descent is limited, sometimes just a few hours of footage, scanning a few square feet. What if we missed something bigger? There have been theories about giant squid navigating the deep currents, or deep-diving sharks crossing through the Hadal Zone. In the Tonga Trench, a camera once recorded a Pacific sleeper shark approaching bait at 1,400 meters. Some researchers think similar species could visit the Mariana from time to time, just briefly enough to escape our view. But what we have seen is already enough to haunt us. Beer bottles where no light reaches, food wrappers buried under silt that hasn't moved in centuries, creatures that glow in the dark, carrying inside them the poisons of our surface world. Every dive into the Mariana is a step into the unknown, but the message is getting clearer.